Welcome back to Business Amma. My name is Simbalaji Charles Kiage. This is your economic review this morning as we look at the biggest headlines that you're waking up to pretty much, which is going to round up how the weekend has been in business. Now, the government will lose at least 172 billion shillings in taxes with the extension of tax reduction measures aimed at helping the country's economy sail through the COVID-19 pandemic. Data from the Parliamentary Budget Office indicates that the Exchequer will lose 122.6 billion shillings in income taxes, both from companies and individual taxpayers. Now, nearly a fortnight after Kenya recorded its first case of COVID-19 on March 13th, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced several tax interventions to cushion the country against the risk of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, among the measures announced was the reduction of value-added tax from 16% to 14%, as well as the extension of 100% tax relief for individuals earning not more than 25,000 shillings. Now, corporation tax and the maximum individual tax rate were also lowered to 25% from 30%, while the reintroduced turnover tax was lowered to 1% from 3%. Now, 6 months down the line, the tax interventions are set to be extended to the end of this year. An analysis by the Parliamentary Budget Office estimates that maintaining the tax reductions will cost the Exchequer a cumulative 172 billion shillings. Now, according to the Budget Office, maintaining VAT at 14% will see the National Treasury lose 49 billion shillings. Corporate income tax will fall by 22.1 billion shillings, with the extended reduction of corporation tax to 25%. Now, the Exchequer will also collect 81.5 billion shillings less in personal income taxes, with the extension of 100% personal tax reliefs, tax reductions on the top rate, and changes in the payee bands. Good, there we are now. This morning, we are joined by Edward Kusama and Tommy Rendo, who are going to help us understand what this really means to the economy. I'm going to start with you, Edward. Now, can you talk to me at the position that KRA, therefore, finds itself in the wake of the extended measures to cushion the economy from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, thank you very much, Simba. I think Kenya Revenue Authority has acted swiftly to support the economy, but these efforts have been constrained by falling revenues and limited physical space. Importantly, I think we needed national policies to remain focused on safeguarding public health and supporting people and businesses. Now, you must understand that taxes play a fundamental role in Kenya's sovereignty, and we significantly fund our national budget through taxes. And to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 to the Kenyan economy, the government had implemented the Tax Law Amendment Act 2020 with effect from 25th April 2020. And you know the measures that were taken. And one of the first measures was a reduction of personal income tax from percent to obviously 25%. Then obviously there was 100% tax relief for persons earning up to Kenya shillings 24,000, just as you said. Again, there was a reduction of the resident corporate income tax 30% to 25%. So the government implemented the following measures to help move forward. Suspension of all lists of all persons, including companies, Credit Reference Bureau, and then obviously central bank rate to 7.2%. And then obviously there was the lowering of the cash reserve ratio, CRR, to 4.2%. So these were some of the measures. But then you must understand that Kenya Revenue Authority cannot tackle these challenges alone, and a coordinated effort by all government departments will be key.
All right, Brendo, I'm going to come back to you, Edward, on exactly what this means now for to the collections and also the funding of the budget in 2020-2021. Now, Tommy, I mean, do you feel that these extensions were needed in the economy?
Yes, they definitely were needed. The COVID pandemic has really slowed down economic activities, limiting what the government collects in terms of revenue. So this was a good step. If you are a first world nation where they can print their own money and not cause too much, better off, but this is the best that we could do under the current circumstances. But
Yes.
also another thing that would really help is the fact they opened up bars. So that really does help a lot.
Fantastic. But Tommy, somebody's gonna ask you, good, we are celebrating that these measures have been extended, but if you look at the effect that they're gonna have on the economy, it's huge, especially when we're talking about an ever widening public debt, which it pretty much means that if KRA cannot give us that, then it pretty much means that we have to go back and borrow again.
We already have borrowed. I'm sure that's what Uhuru was doing in Paris, and he signed up some good deals which should benefit both of us, including some kind of economic package that will cause an influx of money back into the economy. Since we're in unprecedented times, we cannot complain too much about the borrowing at this point in time. At some point, COVID will end and things will get back to normal. Then we can, the point is here, we should not let our economy lag so far behind to where jump-starting it will be a problem. So those measures the government has taken, like reducing VAT, corporate taxes, and all kinds of taxes, is a measure to make sure that we still have steady growth no matter what the pandemic does to us economically at the moment.
Okay, fine. But Edward, let me just rope you in on that as well. Okay, let's talk about the biggest contributor of the 2020-2021 fiscal budget. Edward, look at it. VAT stands as the biggest contributor to the 2020-2021 budget. How has it been affected? I mean, when you look at it from your perspective.
Okay, yes, I mean, you're right. I mean, VAT, I mean, there's reduced consumption. I mean, there's reduced income, obviously, to government as a reduction of VAT from 16 to 14.25%. Definitely, this is going to affect how government carries out its physical space in terms of spending, in terms of its expenditure and activities, and especially projects that have been stalled because right now the government does not have money. I think the government needs to be very innovative moving forward on how it starts raising its revenues. I mean, it cannot having a legacy approach or a traditional approach in the way it brings about raising funds. So I think something else, a stimulus or something else is to be done, because when you reduce taxes, and you know we are a tax-based system basically, and so we depend generally on taxes to be able to sustain operations, to be able to sustain projects. So a reduction in taxes means that a lot of recurrent expenditure has to be, there must be austerity of these expenditures, or come up with new ways to fund government operations.
Okay, Edward, I just want to, yes, I'm going to pick your thoughts from that point, but then, Edward, wow, I'm very sure you did see IMF actually even warn us way earlier when we did introduce these measures to cushion the economy from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. They said, look, guys, you have to revert back to the way things were so that you actually keep on meeting some of your needs, especially this loan repayment. But, well, do you feel that upon the reopening of the economy, then we should have spoken about relaxing some of them, being cognizant of the fact that our economy is not well performing right now?
No, you're very right. And we needed to ease some of the restrictions that according to the IMF, had given Kenyan government. That was, recovery of growth is concerned. You'll obviously have to go back to where you were initially. But then again, if you look at the general macroeconomic conditions and the general business environment, then you realize it's not easy. I mean, organizations and businesses are not operating at that level where we could be able to be, before the pre-crisis level began. So we had to come up with some subsidies or some, we had to ease some of these restrictions, at least to keep afloat. And so there's a contradiction with the International Monetary Fund. But I think moving forward, and as we continue to, post-crisis stabilization, I think then we'll be able to go back where we were before the pre-crisis level.
Right, I can see Alex is joining us this morning. Alex, good morning. Can you get us?
His mic is muted.
Oh, his mic is muted. Well, Gabriel, hi, good morning. Can you get us?
Yeah, I can get you. I can get you clearly. How are you?
Fantastic. So my first question to you is going to be, look, do you feel that it was necessary for us to have this extension of some of the unprecedented measures that we did actually introduce into the economy once we reported cases of COVID-19 in Kenya?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Elijah. And yes, to answer your question, I do believe that it was necessary to have that extension. The reason being, if you look at, and if you do speak to some of the people on the ground, what actually happened is that whatever tax relief was given, for example, on the income tax, because employers were more hard hit, they actually ended up, taking it back through a reduction in pay, which was not supposed to happen. So that's one thing that we saw happen in most companies. So, for example, for some multinationals that decided to cut employee salaries by 20%, in other parts of the world, they cut in Kenya by 25%, so that they could all be leveled. So it might not have gotten to all the targeted recipients, but indeed it was very beneficial to most of them. On the trade taxes, VAT, etc., it has been very beneficial, obviously, to the traders and some of the people who needed that cash flow. Now, why it was necessary is because, remember, the economy is not yet is nowhere even close to where we wanted it to be in terms of activity, not only activity, but as well as spending power. People have lost a lot of spending power. So you can imagine if you are affected for just 2 months, it means your spending power has gone down. So you had obligations that accumulated over those 2 months. It is likely that for the next 4 months that follow, you're just going to be trying to catch up to that. So people still don't have spending power and companies don't. So it was very critical to still have those stimulus. And then to just answer the question on, the performance of KRA, I think it's time that, which Edward has touched on, I think it's time that the government stopped looking at KRA as the only source of revenue and actually started looking at cutting down their own spending. I think that's the quickest and assured cure. Otherwise, if you keep taxing the same economy, there's only as much milk you can get from one cow. So it's about time you reduce your consumption of milk. So I think that's where we are coming from. That might be the most effective way. And they have had significant savings from reduced travel, etc. But, funny enough, the budgets are still looking the same, despite the fact that we don't expect much travel since July. So those are some of the things we just need to look at. But I think I'll take it from the expenditure angle more than from the tax revenue angle, because the tax revenue it is what it is for the tax.
Pretty much. Gabriel, just before I let you go, yes, you're saying, well, they should have been extended. But I want you to look at the situation that therefore pushes to KRA, which has given the highest mandate to get these collections for 2020, 2021. Now, the first 2 months of the year have been another miss from the taxman. Now, what's the way out, therefore, for the government to cut back this gap amid an ever-rising concern for increasing public debt? Gabriel, are we saying go borrow? Because that looks like the only way out for the government.
I think I'll repeat what I say. Don't spend. Reduce your spending. If you reduce your spending, Gabriel, you don't have to go borrow.
Yes. Is it too late? Is it too late to say do not spend? Because 2020, 2021 was already written for us. You have to do something about it. Yes. You can't get to where we are right now and say, well, take back whatever it is you wanted to do. We can't do it anymore.
Look at it this way. I mean, how fast did private companies respond to COVID-19 in terms of spending? Very fast. And these are big companies. We're talking multinationals. We're talking about entities that had fixed costs, etc. But they were able to renegotiate most of them. Because you see, the challenge with the situation and what I know IMF pushes for is tax revenue. If you look at the Kenyan economy, just look at even fuel. Yeah. If you look at the cost of fuel, over half of it is taxes, and these have increased because of VAT. We saw the 1 bob increase over the weekend because of excise. I mean, there's nowhere else to tax. I mean, if you go back to your income, just look at your own spending, Elijah, you'll see that they hit you from every corner. There's nothing left. There's nothing you have that is not taxed. Now, the other thing is to bring on board the informal economy, which I think we keep speaking about, which of course is not caught up in the tax bracket. costs money to bring them on board. Costs a lot of money. You need a lot of tracking data. You need to also give them service, because the problem is those in the formal economy, whether you get what you feel is rightful service from government or not, you're already in the formal space, you'll be caught up. But people in the informal space are able to shift so fast. They're like shapeshifters. The business changes from one thing today to another tomorrow. You come and you've mastered my location and I didn't pay tax yesterday. I can quickly relocate and tomorrow you won't find me again. And then it's a new entity where I am, or we can pretend to be an umbrella. So really, I think dwelling on the aspect of increasing taxes, we've already done that severally over the past few years. And KRA can spend sleepless nights, and if they keep taxing people, it's not going to be enough to meet the level of debt increase that we are undertaking. It's not, those two are not going to match at any single point in time. So the only way we achieve this is actually by government sitting down and saying, we either freeze spending on some items, or we give crazy incentives to some of the informal sector for them to bring some tax revenue. And of course, and we keep telling them this and they know it, but they need to cut borrowing to some extent. That's the only way this works out.
Pretty much. Now, gentlemen, I just want us to join our next conversation with this as well. Now, with the Central Bank of Kenya, Dr. Patrick Njoroge is optimistic that Kenya's economy will rebound to 3.1% this year. His sentiments coming a few months after Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani maintained that Kenya's economic growth will be below 2.5%. Njoroge, who was speaking at the post-meeting MPC briefing, said that the growth could be anchored on economic drivers that the country has witnessed since the outbreak of the coronavirus disease. Njoroge maintained that this was not a precise estimate and that it could be higher. Now that's the point. It could be higher, depending on the caveats that he raised, such as ICT, agriculture, and manufacturing. Now, in January, Governor Patrick Njoroge projected a gross domestic product over 6.2%, up from 5.7% in 2019, backed by a recovery in agriculture and medium and small businesses. All right, Tommy, do you think that Njoroge is getting overly optimistic about our chances this year?
I think he is, but at least we're growing. It's not as good as we would want it to be, but he's being highly optimistic, given the fact that this pandemic has really reduced our economic ability, our ability to trade and do all kinds of things, yes.
But Tommy, I just want to take you back, though. I mean, let's go back to where this number started from. We've seen so many, and I will just point you. The first one was a negative growth. Yes, they didn't give us a number around that area. We saw 1%, we saw 1.9%. 1.9% seemed to be a number that everybody was agreeing to, but this is it. 2.5%. They say it can't go beyond that. There is no possible way it can go beyond that. But now, Tommy, when you look at the way in which we have reacted so far, we're reopening the economy, businesses are still struggling. We've lost 1.7 million jobs so far. A lot of redundancies. Some companies have gone. They ain't gonna come back. I mean, where is he getting his optimism from?
Like I said, the man is highly optimistic, but as we have reduced our curfew and extended working hours, it's helping a little bit. I don't know how he would arrive at that number. I honestly don't know. But like I said, since the economy is opening up, we're slowly chugging along, and those incentives that the government has put in place to grow the economy are helping. But we're still nowhere close to where we should be. Pretty
much. Edward, I just want to rope you in on that as well. Now, this is the caveats that he's saying is relying on. Now, let's go back to that. He's saying ICT, agriculture, and manufacturing. So according to him, they look like they could actually influence our economy very much. Share the same sentiments with him?
No, I mean, the health crisis has precipitated an economic crisis reflecting three large shocks. And the first, disruption of production and a sharp reduction in demand. So let's start from there. And then the second one is there are spillovers from sharp deterioration in global growth. And then there are tighter financial conditions. And then there's a severe decline in commodity prices. So then I don't know where he's getting that optimism. I mean, from that, if there's a disruption of supply chains and there's of production, then and obviously then there's a severe decline in commodity prices. So I don't know where he's getting that optimism from, but maybe he has his numbers right. He knows where to press, or maybe the government knows how to deal with the stress to be able to improve efficiencies. So I think he should tell us, because if you look at global experts, what they are saying, then it means there is a problem as far as growth at that extent is concerned. I mean, we are looking 2023 in East Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa. So I don't just and see whether we can get those numbers.
Pretty much. Edward, I'm going to come to you after this break so that we can actually look at where his optimism is coming from. And I'm going to take you back to even the inflation numbers that we have seen during this COVID-19 pandemic. They have been quite low, surprisingly at that. Let me bring in Gabriel. All right, now, Gabriel, is he being overly optimistic? And from where you said it this morning, do you think that ICT, agriculture and manufacturing so far can push the economy to higher than 3.1%? Because he says it could not be right estimate, but it can be higher. That's what he's saying.
I mean, like my colleague said, he's quite the optimist, but he's not wrong. That is my belief. He's actually not wrong, because what people fail to see is what actually drives, what's the composition of our GDP as Kenya. You know, if you look at a developing country versus a developed country, in a developed country, Europe, US, some of the Asian states, the biggest component of their GDP is always the investment, and a big part of it is the consumer spending. Now, if you look at developing countries like Kenya, where Kenya falls, government spending forms actually a very big chunk of that composition of the GDP. And that is where I think Njoroge is putting his bet on the government spending, because remember, government spending has not stopped. If anything, the government has borrowed and spent quite a bit more in quote unquote the stimulus package. So I think that's what they are counting on. And I think Dr. David D did a very good article about 2 years ago, breaking down why people were saying there's GDP, but we can't see it. It's because of the government spending. Because if you spend 300 billion shillings on the SGR, as much as most of it might not translate into cash in the economy, even if a quarter of it, that's spending that has gone to the economy, and it's classified when you're doing the GDP calculation. So I think that's what we need to understand, the composition of the Kenyan GDP. A big chunk of it is driven by the government spending, which has been increasing, of course, unfortunately, because of increased borrowing, etc. But that is the only thing they can bet on. Otherwise, Edward is right and Tommy is right. You know, consumer spending has gone down. Investment has more than likely declined. Our exports have declined, yet our imports have increased. So those, of course, are the negative side. But what I think he's betting on is general government spending, which has not changed. And like I said, if anything, from all the tea they bought, from all the small spending they did during COVID, you know, keeping the cops up in curfew, spending on medical equipment, etc. As long as it's under government, then they're going to say that it's going to form part of GDP calculation, and that's where you get your miracle growth from.
Pretty much. Gentlemen, I beg that we take a very tiny break once we come back. Therefore, Gabriel, the question is going to be, I mean, from where you seated this morning, because we have to factor in that lower part of the economy and the middle part of the economy. What current indicators point to a recovering economy? Because for anybody listening to you, fine, we can spend, good, and that is going to be factored in the GDP. But is this number in any way going to be felt here in the middle, because we're coming from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic? 2146 as your SMS line, at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. See you probably in just a minute.